24,000 years ago, an ice sheet covered Britain and most of Europe, rendering the land useless and the areas inhabitable. Desperate to find shelter, many groups fled to southern France and Iberia to escape the cold. Roughly 10,000 years later, a rapid climate change caused the ice sheet to recede and the frozen land to melt. About 166 miles from the center of modern-day London lies Cheddar, in Somerset County, England, a large village and civil parish, home to Cheddar mills and a deep canyon called Cheddar's Gorge. On the southern edge of Somerset's Mendip Hills, a cave was found that holds evidence of possibly the first inhabitants of Great Britain once this ice began to melt. The leading cause of their migration through Doggerland, a landmass that once linked England and Europe, was due to a possible pack of horses that traveled back to the hills of Somerset. Theorized to be horse hunters, the Cheddar Gorge inhabitants recolonized modern-day Cheddar and hunted horses and other large forms of game, evidenced by the retrieval of large ivory rods similar to harpoons found within the cave. The final disappearance of these inhabitants was most likely due to the existence of birch forests that created a less attractive habitat for horses, their primary food source, as well as another cold period known as the Younger Dryas that Britain plunged into thousands of years later. The cave served as their home and a shelter from the cold, and after being excavated between 1892 and 1898, was named Gough's Cave, after Richard Cox Gough. Gough's Cave is 250 feet deep, 1.33 miles long, and contains large chambers and rock formations, including stalagmites and stalactites. The cave was formed 500,000 years ago, when water started dissolving the limestone rock. Light enters the cave, creating shadows, such as the black cat of Cheddar, that supposedly depicts a cat wearing a bow tie. The Cheddar Yo, the largest underground river system in Britain, can also be found here, which has caused many of the passages to flood, and has made most of the passages impossible to get into, and can only be reached through diving or swimming great lengths underwater. Chambers such as Bishop's Palace, Lloyd Hall, and Shepherd's Crook were discovered to have many treasures that would help show archaeologists what life was like 14,700 years ago. Bones found within the cave are most likely an accumulation of 2 to 3 generations of inhabitants. Although the cave dates back 14,700 years ago, archaeologists have found a complete skeleton of a male individual dating to about 9,000 years ago that they have promptly nicknamed Cheddar Man. Due to a blow to the head, possibly causing brain damage, Cheddar Man was buried in a twilight zone of the cave to prevent his spirit from passing to the land of the ancestors. He was not, however, the most interesting find in Gough's Cave. Other much older human and animal bones have been found to have a pattern of cut marks. Some archaeologists suggest that cannibalism played a heavy part in the survival of the inhabitants of Gough's Cave. Many theories have been speculated about why cannibalism may have been present at this time. Some say that cannibalism was part of a ritual where eating a bit of a relative was an act of homage, while others say it was caused by the lack of other food sources at this time. A third theory is floating around that the inhabitants just had a preference for human flesh. Bones of humans were also found smashed to bits, which some archaeologists assume was to retrieve the bone marrow. Still, there are many archaeologists that deny any act of cannibalism taking place whatsoever, and simply put the cut marks and the smashing of the bones down to portability. They suggest that individuals were dying away from the cave. In order to make them more portable to bring them back, the inhabitants would cut off the flesh and smash the bones. Currently, no evidence of traumatic wounds, other than on the skull of the Cheddar Man, have been found on the skulls discovered. Therefore, if cannibalism was a part of the inhabitants' daily lives, then the human flesh was only consumed when the individuals had died of natural causes. Right now, all other theories are speculation, because archaeologists cannot understand the true intent behind the smashing and the slashing of the human bones. Despite the controversy over this find, some human skulls have been found on site that were fashioned into ritual drinking skull cups or bowls. A carving of a mammoth was also found that is estimated to be 13,000 years old. As an introduction to possibly the first post-Ice Age inhabitants of Great Britain, 14,700 years ago, this site helps archaeologists to detail the migration patterns of these horse hunters, as well as the devastating effects the cold played on the survival of the Gough's Cave inhabitants. The possible presence of cannibalism would revolutionize our understanding of how people lived and survived in Britain during this Ice Age. Cheddar Man, mentioned previously at the beginning of this video, is also the oldest and most complete skeleton that has been found in Great Britain thus far. Modern-day technology has allowed researchers to discover that mitochondrial DNA from Cheddar Man matches the DNA of a modern-day person who lives in the village today. This shows evidence that these early inhabitants are the ancestors of the modern-day villagers of Cheddar. Currently, tourists have the chance to experience Gough's Cave, But for archaeologists, the cave still holds many mysteries and possibilities, for many of the chambers are underwater and excavation has become difficult. The cave is also used to mature cheddar cheese as well. It looks like 14,700 years later, after its first occupation, the cave is still useful for the present-day Englishman.